Thank you everyone for coming. Joshua and I are here in conversation today because they're currently the artist in residence at Ma's House in Southampton, founded by Jeremy Dennis, who's here in the audience. Joshua reached out to me about moderating this artist talk about their practice. The two of us met years ago through a mutual friend, and um, you invited me to work on a project, Sex Dreams, the Beauty of Queer and Trans Desire, that you were directing, organizing, and writing about for them, which is a Condé Nast publication for LGBTQ readers and audiences. And since then, the two of us have developed a friendship. Joshua is extremely well known and beloved in the New York City arts and activism spaces. Um, After having led marches, protests, etc., for many, many years, this developed into a really robust and really beautiful visual artist practice and writing practice. So I would just invite you to tell the audience a bit about that to begin before we jump into these questions.
Thank you so much. I want to take a second to say thank you all for coming out today. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're spending this evening with me, and it means a lot. So I want to say thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to my friends at Ma's House for helping to put this together, as well as the amazing team here at the Bridgehampton Museum, and of course to my dear friend Jasmine Weber. She won't say this, but this is an award-winning writer here. Who had to find time in a very busy schedule. Just traveled into out east last night to come make time for this conversation, and I have deep admiration and respect for your work and your writing. And so thanks for making the time today to come and speak with me.
Thank you.
Yes, so I am a newer artist. Like Jasmine just eliminated, I've been in the community organizing and activism space for well over 10 years. I gave a TED Talk when I was 19. I helped to organize some of the largest actions and marches in New York City history, particularly for queer and trans people. And so I come from a background of anti-violence, anti-racism, anti-queerphobia, etc. But I found that work was very draining. Spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, it took a lot out of me. And I found that my practice as an artist, creating, ideating, exploring, connecting with people has been generative and healing for me. And so I've given myself permission in the last few years to do a new dance in the world, to leave behind the things that I'm trying to get rid of, and to lean more into the things that I'm trying to create, which is what led me to my practice as an artist, and in many ways to this residency here at Montauk House. And so maybe just speaking to our connection a little bit more, I wrote and directed a photo series for a Condé Nast publication called Sex Dreams. It was really a visual expression of what it would look like if queer and trans people and our experiences of desire and sexuality were allowed to exist in public space. And looking back on that project years ago, now I'm really glad that I did it, because if we think about what's happening in the political context of the country that we live in right now, the ability for queer and trans people to exist in public space is actually being eradicated, from a policy standpoint, and from an interpersonal standpoint. And so my practice as an artist is rooted in that spirit of activism, of change making. And really at the core of my work, what I'm looking to do is to create visual, physical, political, and economic shifts in the culture to where we could live in a world a little bit more just than we found it.
And for those of you who might be learning about Joshua's work for the first time today, you can see an example of a truly stunning self-portrait, which is a part of, from our conversations, a years in development project that really the centers spirituality, centers diasporism, centers queerness. And so themes, um, you're working with themes that have incredible lineages, and that has made itself apparent through this like multimedia um, through this multimedia practice. And so Joshua's working in photography, video, performance, collage, assemblage, um, like we talked about writing as well. And I'm curious, what do you find is the utility of working across so many mediums and finding the synergies between them, and the collaboration that arises because of that?
I think maybe the main utility is that working through different mediums is just a different mode of expression. And so here's a portrait that I spent a couple of years working on. I went to South Africa and learned a specific beading technique to install these 13 pounds of beads in my hair. I studied lighting for 6 months while I was in residence at the World Trade Center as an artist there. So I wrote and developed my own kind of lighting treatment. And it's really what working in different mediums like that does is it allows you to express your feelings inside to the best of your ability. Now, of course, you can ask someone to do lighting for you, but I don't think anyone could capture the mood that I was feeling and seeing better than me. So I took the time to kind of learn about lighting. Same thing with uh, not just the technical aspects, but the cultural and the artistic aspects as well. I find there's so much utility and fruit that I find in learning about different cultures, different experiences. Even I just did a workshop with beading at Ma's house recently. It's kind of a meditative practice, right? So that is kind of a through line with what you would find in any other art practice. But it's really just a mode of expression through video, through beading, through writing. You're finding a way to kind of let out what's happening inside out into the public and hopefully making it in a way that's like visually appealing and beautiful. And so I'm enjoying playing around in different mediums and experimenting with different things because I feel like it allows me to express the ideas to their highest version.
Yeah. And I think what really stands out to anyone who were to watch this video for the first time is, of course, the many pounds of beads that you have woven into your hair. I think it's visually beautiful, but I also think the longer that you sit with it, the longer that you gaze with it. This video that will be playing behind us is over 40 minutes of you moving your body, contending with the weight of these beads, contending with the spiritual energy that these beads are imbued with. And I think that there's a really lovely story behind that that I would appreciate if you could share with us.
Yeah, thank you for that. So while I'm in Miles' house, I'm working on this short film project. This is like a draft of it. Basically, what I'll be doing is kind of writing a voiceover to go along with it. So as you all saw in the still portrait that went before, it's a piece called Done where I'm holding 13 pounds of beads. It's set in black and white, and really what it does is it kind of deals with the embodied tension of being African American living in this country, feeling too African to be American, feeling too American to be African, and kind of struggling with this weight of where do I fit in. And so we installed the 13 pounds of beads and kind of expanded the still portrait into this moving film in order to kind of show that embodied practice of holding that weight day to day. And really, what I'm trying to do with this project is make something beautiful out of feelings that I've felt my whole life that I imagine many other people do. Whether or not you're African American, whether, no matter where you're from, right? Many of us in this country feel like there's an asterisk beside our identity, beside our citizenship, beside who we are. And I wanted to kind of give myself the chance to sit with that, to express it, to hold it, and hopefully to let it go and to do something different with my brain space. But here depicted in terms of like the materials and the process, it took me a couple of years to get this project off the ground because I wanted to go study the beading technique. I wanted to do some studying of lighting. And I wanted to play with this idea of cell memory that exists in the water around us. And so the journey of many African Americans here in this country started with the slave trade from the western coast of Africa over here to North America. And so I took all of these beads that we hand designed and I flew them over to the southernmost tip of the continent of Africa and activated them into the Atlantic Ocean. So all of these beads are ocean soaked beads that you see in my hair. Which added, of course, to the weight. We installed them and then did this embodied practice and put it on film. As a way to kind of reference that duality that I feel like exists inside of me, and to do it with found materials found in nature, beads made out of wood, water that kind of holds the memory of that slave trade, and to make something beautiful out of it.
Yeah, and I think that interacting with these materials that have these cross-Atlantic histories speaks generally to the work that you're making, speaks also, of course, to your activist practice. But I think that this idea of adornment, I think there's no question that this took many hours to install, if not days. Of course, like you might sit for 10 hours just to get braids themselves. This could take like an infinite amount of time, especially when you're doing things like this with a lot of care. These sorts of practices have really deeply rooted community ties. Like a lot of us have memories of having our hair done by our loved ones, whether that's a parent or a sister or whoever that might be. And so I think that taking the time to like really lovingly adorn yourself is a really ancestral practice. And I'm curious how this adornment shows up throughout your work. Um, whether this is adorning yourself through your hair, adorning yourself with makeup, the clothing that you choose to wear during certain performances, during certain photo shoots, etc. If you could talk about that.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I was just joking with Jeremy a second ago before the talk started. He's like, "Yeah, you're going to be on 4 different cameras." I said, "Yeah, this has to be documented." Because a big part of part of what motivates my practice as an artist and really just as a human being is that I realize that Black people, queer people, trans people, people who've been marginalized by power systems in this country are some of the largest generators of wealth and abundance. When we think about the political economy, when we think about local economies, the cultural creation historically and contemporarily, our communities feed multi-billion-dollar industries. If we think about the makeup industry, the hair industry, these are billion-dollar industries in the 21st century. And although our labor, our efforts, and the way that we live our lives contribute so much culture and generates wealth as a byproduct, why is that wealth, why is that abundance not reflected in the very communities that creates it? And so I find that so much of my motivation with creating artwork and adorning myself in beautiful ways, of inserting myself with confidence and power in public, is about reversing that narrative and fighting back against it, grappling with the unjust reality that many times marginalized people are contributing to wealth that they don't ever get a chance to experience. And my practice as an artist refuses that and inserts myself and other people just like me in positions of dignity and power to create a sense of justice through art.
Yeah, I think that that's incredible. And I think when I'm looking at this right now, it's we've spoken about these kinds of topics that we wanted to move through. We've been talking all day about this, but I think the beautiful thing about speaking one-on-one as artists, even though we might be before an audience, is that so much is coming up for me right now. I'm looking at this and I'm considering the ways that you're utilizing objects like beads and shells that were used as currency. And I think that what you're speaking to about the wealth that communities of color, specifically to our communities, to Black communities, um, the wealth that's being generated, but not being that's not being realized by the community because of these systems of white supremacy. I think that the connotation of using these objects that were imbued with value as as finance in another context is truly stunning to me. And it also calls to mind, of course, this idea of childhood and the adornment that you get to relish in childhood, but also as queer people to now in adulthood be able to define that in a unique way, to define that in an autonomous way. Um, and I just thank you for that work and for the opportunity to have conversations like this.
Thanks for seeing it.
Yeah. Um, And so there was a phrase that some folks might have caught that you used of cell memory. And so that philosophy is something that Joshua has coined and undergirds their practice. And so when we began speaking about this talk and speaking about this concept of cell memory, I was reading a book called Black Elegies by Kimberly Juanita Brown, and I came across a similar term, unrelated, blood memories, which was utilized by the Black queer choreographer Alvin Ailey, who is an ancestor now and who is heralded among dancers, queer artists, the queer community, the Black community alike, as a trailblazer who used his incredible power, incredible talent to uplift his community. And I think that I see there an incredible parallel with the work that you're making. And then, of course, also the philosophical parallel. In terms of the definition of blood memories, as far as Ailey considered it, was finding these connections between Black art histories and the work that he was making through art, through really difficult histories of enslavement, of of discrimination that he was facing as a Black dancer in the New York City art world. And that definitely called to mind the concept of cell memory. And I would just invite you to um, to offer your definition of cell memory and tell us a little bit about how that undergirds your practice.
Yeah, thank you for that. I thought a lot about when I first started working on this series. I thought a lot about the ways that history, sometimes our own genealogies, our heritages, have been taken away from us as African American people, and I thought a lot about what synergy existed between my practice and that of the work that exists at Ma's House. Because I was aware of Ma's House for a couple of years, but I thought because of this kind of space that I found myself in today, finalizing this kind of short film project that I've been working on for a while, I thought a lot about those connections that are held in Native and Indigenous communities where we're taught that through kind of forced assimilation that we don't know our histories, we don't know our languages, we don't know who we are, so we have to be kind of integrated into this idea of American empire, right? That you're now a part of this, you're just American, there's no other larger part to you. And I thought to myself, well, obviously this is like not real because us existing kind of proves negates that theory, right? That like we don't have a history. We obviously do come from somewhere, and many of our language, our names, much of that has just been hidden. It's there to be uncovered. And so I wanted to kind of play with the idea that like who we are, and where we're from is a part of us. And it comes from our individual selves. Just like, trauma can be held in your cells, memories can be held in your cells. And that's kind of what I was playing with. And so I wanted to and I try to use bound materials and materials that exist in the everyday world because they're more sustainable. But that's why I wanted to kind of infuse water into the beads and to make it a part of my practice, to kind of just like reference their histories that maybe I don't have access to or that I don't know or that have been erased and that are there for me to be uncovered. And so the kind of way that I begin that practice is by starting from a place of water, which is really kind of what attracted me to the Moz House residency at this time, because I know that my community and your community has this kind of ongoing synergy and shared experiences. And I thought, what better place to come and try to do some more of this excavating work of my own personal history by learning more about others.
Yeah, I would love to hear you talk more about this connection with water, how you came to incorporate in your practice. I know, of course, you mentioned activating the beads in the water, but a little bit more about the intention behind that. I think a lot of people, of course, are familiar with the transatlantic slave trade. These stories of stolen people being trafficked across the Atlantic Ocean to be dropped in ports in the Caribbean, in South America, in North America. These are incredibly painful histories. These are incredibly familiar histories. And like you mentioned, there's an attempt to bury these lineages and traditions, but the existence of our communities are living proof that they have not been buried, that they have not been stamped out, and they won't be. And I think that work like yours is a constant reminder of that. Um, and so there's absolutely a tradition of Black writers, of Black artists who are thinking about water, who are working with water, and that you now, as an artist, are joining them. And I'd be curious if you have any more thoughts about um, the philosophical or spiritual reactions that you might have when you're having these interactions. Something that we talked a lot about is activation. And I think that as a performer, there's something being activated in a space. I think right now, us speaking before an audience rather than in an enclosed room, there's something being activated in the space. And I think that that's really important to share with folks. And I think there is an activation. Um, there's a sensation, there's a tactility, there's a lot happening when you put your feet in the water for the first time, when you dunk your body in the water for the first time, when you put your hair under the sink and let your hair be saturated. And I'd love to hear about how that relates to your work.
Yeah. Well, I wish there are things that I want to share with you that I cannot right now. But that if you happen to be in town and free on Saturday, I would love to invite you to the Watermill Center, where I'll be doing a performance piece that involves water out in public space here at the Watermill Center from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. if you're around. So I don't want to give too much away for this
Mhm.
performance that's coming up on Saturday, but I think maybe what I'll express personally. Um, uh, that has been so transformative about water is that it allows me to realize that I am a part of something that is so much bigger than myself.
Mm.
Whether that's like, thinking about myself as an individual droplet in a part of water, whether or not that's kind of like floating in the water when I need to kind of relax and unwind and realizing that I'm weightless when I'm connected with something bigger than myself. And just maybe in my own personal life, like as I was going and doing a lot of the research for this project, I said I went to Cali in Colombia, I went out to Tofo in Mozambique, and then out to Johannesburg in South Africa to kind of source all the materials and do all of my research. Um, and so, as a result of the kind of cities that I was in, much of the work that I was doing while I was collecting information, stories, and research, it was all happening by the water. Which I realized obviously is what kind of connects all of us as human beings to each other. Before we had planes, we were kind of meeting each other through boats. And so those are some of the motivations for using water in my practice.
Yeah, beautiful. And so, as you mentioned, water is one of the things that drew you to come to Ma's house, which is located on the Shinnecock Reservation, the original inhabitants of the area that we are currently standing on. And so I'm curious, during your time at Ma's house, as a resident, the kind of experience that you've had getting to know the community here, getting to spend time at the beach, getting to spend time in the towns here. This also is not your first time here. As Joshua mentioned, there is going to be an open spaces at the Watermill Center, and those of you who are attending can look forward to seeing the closing performance, which will be very exciting. I would encourage everyone to attend. Um, and you were previously a resident at the Watermill Center, so this is not your first time spending time on this eastern end of Long Island. Um, and so I'm curious about some of the lessons that you've learned, some of the connections you might have made with the community. Um, you're very extroverted, you're very friendly, and I think that people are very drawn to you. And so I know you've made a lot of friends out here, and I know that that's been a really fruitful experience. If you could talk about that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think I was aware of certain synergy that would already kind of exist between my work and Ma's house, having interacted with them before and having visited a few years ago. But maybe just the number one thing I've learned, I've had a chance to attend some of their really cool workshops that, if you all are not aware of, they have a number of kind of weekly and bi-weekly programs that are going on. Really cool language project that's being shown right now. And I think what I've learned through our time together is that culturally we have so many similarities, right? Like what makes us, what my relationship as a person to this country is, I have more in common with Native and First Nations and Indigenous people than I do with many other people that I'll come in contact with. And so even just like seeing the intentional effort to preserve language, to preserve histories, to think about alternative economies. We're talking about beads and shells as being sources of currency. Sitting around for some of the conversations, I've been learning about just how much we have in common, how much we have to learn from one another. And so it's been a beautiful experience working with Moz House. And then maybe with my relationship with the area more generally, it is true I do have friends here, and I've been having a good time outside of just my art practice. I've been enjoying myself and living my best life. But what's been nice too is that I have a number of friends coming up to the city. I'll be brief with this, but I have a number of friends coming up to the city over the weekend. And I found with many young people, with many Black people, poor and working class, everyday people, they feel like the area and the Hamptons in general is inaccessible to them, like they don't belong there, like if I go, what am I supposed to do? Maybe some apprehensions even in 2025 about how you'll be treated, how you'll be received. Will you be allowed in certain places? And it's sad that people think these thoughts, but it's true, particularly for people who do not know. And so outside of the very special relationship that I've been cultivating with Moz House over the last couple of weeks, it's also been really cool to have this public program here today. Like you said, to be closing the Watermill Center's Open Spaces Day this weekend, which I'm really proud of. Because like I said, it goes to that kind of central theme and motivating force in my work, which is allowing us as our full and authentic selves to be allowed to be free and open and authentically ourselves and to be welcomed and celebrated.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Um, I would love to hear a little bit about I would love to hear a little bit about these experiences that you've had traveling. I think that one thing that people who don't necessarily have their own artist practice, or people who are getting started in their artist practice, um, don't necessarily know is the durational aspect of things, the time that goes into this. This project is something that was born, I believe, 2022, correct? And is still ongoing. This is something that you are really taking your time with and that you are meditating with and that you are going to treat as a precious object in a sense because it is so personal. It is so necessary in terms of transforming these intangible feelings into something visible, into something that you can share with the world. And I think that part of that feeling as an artist is a deep, deep necessity. It feels like something that has to come out. Um, and that might take 5 minutes, but it could also take 5 years. It could take 50 years. And I think that that is something that's so beautiful about this process of creating. And I would invite you to tell us a little bit more about the travel that went into this. I know you mentioned different cities that you went to, and if you could talk a little bit about the makeup practices that you learned in Colombia or what you were learning in Mozambique, to share a little bit about just how much time and energy went into this. I think we can look at an image and never know just how much attention and care and deep, deep love went into it.
Yeah, and money too.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been over 2 years working on this project. I was explaining to Jasmine this morning that I it was about making those intangible feelings into something that was beautiful. That was kind of what I set out to do. And I wasn't worried about it being commercially successful. I wasn't worried about selling work right away. I mean, looking back, I wish I would have worried about that a little bit faster. But yeah, I was wanting to create something that was what was important to me, and I wanted to do it really well. And so, I mean, I guess I could have, because you hear about people, you see portraiture artists who like, kind of just order all their products. So if you want to have a model or a subject wearing beads, you just order the beads off Amazon, you throw them in a salon, and like you kind of do the thing like that. But I wanted my pieces, at least when I sat with them, to feel like an experience, not just a pretty photo. And so I like committed to a process over a couple of years to create the images that I wanted to see in the world by kind of yeah, it I wanted to create the images that I wanted to see in the world, and I wanted to have the world kind of be a part of it too. So that's kind of where the activation of the beads in water came from, where getting handcrafted beads came from, where learning how to paint and draw them myself came from. I was fascinated by how I could play with, and none of the shots you're going to see here, but like I was fascinated with how I could play with the idea of makeup, like a warrior makeup, a makeup that was kind of affirming and powerful, and I couldn't find anything when I was traveling across South Africa, where I got most of like the adornment materials. And so I have a couple of friends who are really involved artists in Cali, Colombia, and they were like, Josh, you should come look at some of our Afro-Indigenous techniques that we do here. And so it took me about 6 months after that original conversation to go over to learn them. But like that makeup technique is on one of the major portraits that I have out now at the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporic Art down in the city. And so, yeah, a lot of it was traveling, a lot of it was talking to people, a lot of it was learning. A lot of it was trying to be patient and understanding that, like, things are not going to happen overnight. I explained to Jasmine earlier that, like, I went to go source some jewelry materials, and right when I was about to go fly out, the Omicron variant came along, and so all of my flights were canceled, and I had to wait 6 more months down the line to be able to go out and do my research again. So it has been an involved process, if that's what the question is trying to learn
Yeah.
about. But honestly, it's one that comes out of love, because now when I look at the portraits that I have finalized that are starting to show at galleries and museums here in this country and later on this summer in other countries as well, what I'm finding what I'm finding is that they resonate with people more, right? They're more full, well-rounded pieces of work, um, because of the experiences that I had to go through to create them.
Yeah. Beautiful. And so we've talked a little bit about, of course, your time here at Ma's house. Um, I'd be curious if you'd share with everyone a little bit about your trajectory as an artist. I think it's a really fascinating trajectory. Of course, like you mentioned, you did a TED Talk at 19. You are really well respected in the activist space. And I think that you've now gone on to have a billboard with Four Freedoms, which is an organization founded by Hank Willis Thomas, a very famous Black contemporary artist. You, of course, have this residency. You've had your residency at the Watermill Center. Your first residency was at the World Trade Center. If you could just share with everyone a little bit about that journey.
I mean, it's been all good, if I'm being honest. It's been a really good journey. I was explaining when Jasmine and I had a conversation earlier, I think maybe the hardest thing for me was to embrace that I could do a new dance in the world and that I could be good at it. And so a lot of my journey as an artist has just been personal, like making sure that I'm in therapy and talking about work, not just personal stuff, so that I'm like not letting fear and insecurity get in my way to go and be great. So that's been a big part of it. Um, I'm an extrovert. I'll go out to an opening. I'll go meet people any day of the week. I find that's been really transformative for me. Learning from other artists, seeing myself in their practice, and also accepting when I don't see myself either. One of the things we spoke about this morning was that like a lot of times you go to an artist talk and they're kind of like moody, brooding, reluctant to the stage. They'll talk about their work but not themselves. That's just not me. I like the stage. I like to talk about myself. It's not all about the work. My work is about who I am, really. And I hope that my practice can be a source of personal transformation, not just for myself, but also for others. And so a lot of it has been kind of getting out of my own way and saying, Josh, just be who you are,
Yeah.
like who you are, share and make work that you think is important to you. And hopefully an audience will be attracted to it as a result. And so, yeah, in my career trajectory, I found that I had my first major residency at the World Trade Center, one of the most prestigious and difficult to get into in the country. Only 0.3% of people get in every year.
Wow.
And so that was pretty major, and I'm really grateful for that. Being a part of For Freedoms, an international arts organization, has been a big blessing in my life. And having Hank Wells Thomas as a mentor has been as well. Um, yeah, and so like I have this residency now. When I get back to New York, I'm moving. I have another one that I just got awarded right before I left. So it's felt really good. It's felt really good. And more than anything, I think about how I want my practice to be a beacon of hope and light for other people. It's not even just young people, but people of all ages to know that it's okay to do a new dance in the world if it calls you.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. I'm curious, just from the things that we've kind of been exploring in this conversation. Like I mentioned, we've been talking all day. And I'm curious if there are things that are kind of circling in your head that you want to share with the audience. One thing that we talked about a little bit earlier are the relationships that you have with other artists, whether it be as mentors, as friends, as collaborators, as we were thinking through some of the different like ancestors who we might think of as inspirations, and I'm curious if maybe that's something that you'd want to explore a little bit. I know that you just mentioned Hank Willis Thomas and the mentorship that you two have been able to develop together, but I also know that you have a lot of really lovely friendships with other artists in New York City and beyond. And if you want to talk about that spirit of collaboration or mentorship and how that kind of propels you forward as an artist.
For sure. Thank you for that. I had just to speak with some friends about her last night, but I have a really great friend, Tourmaline. She's a part of the permanent collection at the Met right now. Her work is in the Afrofuturism room. She's really cool. We were at the World Trade Center together. She actually has a book that just came out earlier this week called Marsha P. Johnson. It's like the first definitive biography on Marsha P. Johnson. It's like the life and defiance of.
I believe you're right. I actually read I read it. I started. I'm like
Yeah.
halfway through and it's really beautiful. I
Really
would
good
recommend
book.
it.
So it just came out. I recommend it to everyone to read. But she's been a great source point of inspiration for me because she doesn't put herself in a box. I mean, she just came out with a book this week. She does film and television work. She just did a lot of like the for last year or 2 years ago's MTV Awards. Like she did a lot of their film work then. So she does work in pop culture space and the literature space, and in the fine art space. And I think, yeah, her work is driven by a singular engine, which is to make the world a brighter place for people like us. So I have a deep sense of admiration and respect for her, for Hank Willis Thomas as well. Mickalene Thomas, the work that she's doing with portraiture and kind of just depicting a certain community in a glorious way has been a big source point of inspiration for me. And also just I would say I'm really inspired by right now by like what the lineage of Black portraiture artists in the United States have done. Because I think over the last couple of hundred years, as the genre has existed, what these people have done is really radically redefine the way that we see Blackness in America.
Hmm.
And I really appreciate that work and hope I can consider myself a part of that.
Absolutely. And that being said, I'd be curious to hear about some of the work that you've been making during your time at Moz House. And even if you can't share specifics of what people might be able to expect, um, just philosophically, if there are any things that you've kind of learned about your practice or about yourself while being able to spend time out here. I think that one really wonderful benefit of a residency is also to be able to just like breathe, let your shoulders relax, spend some time learning about yourself, and that might not come to fruition as a specific project, but it might come to just mean learning something about yourself as an artist and what your needs are as an artist, if you can talk about that.
Yeah, I think just maybe that I should slow down a lot more and just sit with my feelings, sit with my work, sit with my ideas, you know. Because sometimes things can come to you quickly, right? Like if you're painting and you're on a tear, you could finish a piece in a night, right? But like were you rested enough? Do you have the supplies? Were you kind of setting yourself up for success? I think this time at Mom's House has been helping me think about that because there's no rush. Like when the work comes out, it'll be time. So I'm kind of giving myself a little bit more time because I'll be honest, when I was on the way up here from the city, I was thinking I'm gonna come, I'm gonna get my shit done. But that's not really how it works, right? And I'm okay with that. Um, yeah, so I'm walking away from this experience thinking, Josh, you should slow down a little bit more and sit with the ideas. Because what I'm finding is that um, there's a thousand different ways to approach a topic or approach a theme. Like you guys saw the still portrait, now you're seeing the moving one, and you'll see kind of the expansion of this project if you come out on Saturday. And so I can explore these feelings, these ideas, and these themes through photography, but also through video and also through performance. And the only way you can do that is if you sit with the feelings, you let them all come, and you kind of work them through, hopefully in collaboration with others. That's probably the biggest thing I've learned this week.
Yeah, and I think that this idea of sitting with emotions, sitting with your reality, sitting with your body is something that really comes through in the work already. I think that, like you mentioned, you're balancing 13 pounds of beads on your head. And I think for folks who have never had braids, um, you you might not know that they're already heavy. They're already very heavy, and you are doing something incredibly embodied by adding this to your hair. You have to be incredibly present in your body to make sure your back is okay, to make sure your neck is okay, just to balance. And obviously, this is incredibly stunning. You're watching them swing. And you might not realize because you're making it look very effortless that this is not an easy task. And so I think that this kind of embodiment comes through in your work. I think that this meditation comes through in your work. Um, and on that note, I would certainly invite everybody who is watching in the audience to come on Saturday to see how this practice continues, because I think that this is years in the making, and I think that we are witnessing an incredible artist who is blossoming and who has many opportunities on the horizon. We were talking earlier about how this is a landmark year for your work in terms of the opportunities that you're going to move forward with and that you are currently in and have recently completed. Um, and I think it's been an honor to have this chat with you.
Thank you.
Before we fully wrap up, I would definitely invite you to give any final thoughts or to bring up anything that might have resonated with you that you want to dig a little deeper into.
Thank you, one, for those kind words. Thank you all for coming out and making the time today. This has been very special to me. I was out of town. I was out of town when the idea for this program first came around. And I really kind of had to push myself to think, Josh, what is it that you have to say? What do you have to contribute to this community that you're going to come and be a part of for a couple of weeks at the end of the spring? And I feel really good with what we've shared today. I hope that you have a better understanding of who I am, what my practice is about. I hope you feel better about yourself and the ability to go out and make transformative work happen and whatever it is that you do. And thank you, Jasmine, for making the time today. It really means the
Thank
world.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have time, of course, for audience questions. I would invite if anybody has something. Yeah.
Where do you take strength from when you like don't be shot right against the windmills wind, you know, when you feel like I'm a black artist and they may look down on me because I'm a black artist,
Where do I find the strength from?
to just resist this type of pushback that you may get? What assume you get?
Yeah.
Before you answer, I'll just summarize that for the audience. So the question was about where Joshua finds the strength to push back during moments that there might be tensions arising as a Black artist, and when there might be difficulties because of your identity as a Black artist, and yeah, the well that you're pulling from to continue forward in those moments.
Yeah, I think number one, I identify as a try hard. Like I try hard at anything that I do. Doesn't matter what it is. If I'm making breakfast, I want to make the best breakfast on earth that day. If I'm going for a run, I want to make the fastest time possible. I like to be the best that I could be. Also, particularly, I'm aware of just how lucky that I am. Many other Black artists, especially just people that I meet in general, not even just Black artists, like um, a lot of artists don't have a chance to show their work at museums or galleries. They never really sell. I was actually at an event in Sydney in Australia a couple months ago, and I was talking to a young person who was an artist there, and they're like, "Oh, so where are you showing your work?" And I kind of explained some of the institutions that I've been working with, and they're like, "Josh, I've been practicing for 10 years and I've never shown anywhere." And so I know that I am, particularly in terms of young Black artists in the United States, I'm very fortunate. So when I think about the opportunities that I do have, I think, well, Josh, it's you. So you go and do your best. And then what I also think about is that there were so many people who came before me who did so much more with less. And so if not me, then who? And if not now, then when to create great work? And so I tell myself that every day. I mean, obviously there are days that I don't do as much, but with that motivating me, I feel like I've got plenty of strength to carry on. Thank you.
Are there any other?
I really like your energy. I don't know, there's something, about you that we don't see a lot of in this world. I just mean you're very free with your ideas and emotions, and I think gets to the question that this lady was asking, how do you, push through when some people really don't think about the people who are trying to keep you down. I think you're part of that. You know it, but you know what your job is you were put on earth to do.
Mhm.
So, the question kind of becomes a moot point when you've started to work the way that you do on a consistent basis. I know people like you. I taught school, and I know how Black students feel about wanting to do the work, but they don't know how
Mhm.
it's going to be received. And I just love to see your energy because you're the type of person who I'd bring into a classroom and just let talk the students so that they know it's anything's possible. I was thinking while I was looking at this though about Bo Derek
Uh-huh.
and the beads and how, the braided bead didn't become kind of acceptable until a white woman got her hair done in a Caribbean island.
Mhm.
And we all had beads at one point, and they are very heavy. I took mine out after maybe 3 days. I couldn't
Yeah.
take it, and it was just like normal beading at the bottom. It was like that, but glass beads, they're heavy. Plus, it's not swinging your head back and forth. So I just want to give all kudos to you about this project because it's amazing. And the way you speak about your work is extremely interesting. I'd like you to put years in when you say something like you've been at the World Trade Center. I showed at the World Trade Center in 1981. It was before they had a residency. They asked me to show a particular body work that I had. And so the only thing that I would really ask you to do is tell the years that you're doing the things that you're doing, because a lot of people really don't understand until you insert the time that we're living in. I mean, you're a young person doing incredibly interesting work in the time that we're living in. And, you know, for a historical document like this, I think that you need to always insert the historical moment that we're in. That's all I really want to say.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to speak to me after, I'd like to talk to you, because I think we met when you were at Watermill with.
Because you look familiar.
Yeah, I think we met briefly.
Okay.
I was in residence there during COVID. I was there twice because we had to close up during COVID, and then when we came back, I think it was your residence and some others. So I'd like to talk to you after. It's
awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful. And based on that really wonderful commentary and question, I would actually invite you right now to tell us a little bit about the timeline and the lineage, because this is being filmed. This is your historical document. I would invite you to tell us about what years you were working on these projects and residencies.
Okay, maybe we'll okay, so I'll say just really briefly that when I was 19 years old, I was invited to give a TED Talk at Middlebury's annual conference. And that was because at the time I was really involved in the movement for Black Lives and the movement for gender justice in the United States, and had kind of rose to be a leader that people recognize, at least on social media, I guess you could say. People knew me from that. So that was.
And in real life.
And in real life. But I was a teenager, so it's kind of hard to assess. So that was 10 years ago. So that was in 2015. So I was 19, today I'm 29. A few years after that, in 2020, I went on to host the March for Black Trans Lives in Brooklyn. It was the largest action in US history for Black trans people. So it had over 10,000 people in my hometown of Brooklyn. And I was the first and last voice you heard at that action. That was in 2020. In 2021, I received my first residency, which was at the World Trade Center called Civil Arts Projects. That same year, I got a concurrent residency at the LGBT Center of New York. I was the first ever activist in residence there. In 2022, I came up to the Watermill Center and had a residency there via For Freedoms. I'm returning to the area now with Moz House. And then when I return back to New York, I'm going to be beginning my 6th residency, which will be the Bayard Rustin residency at Pennington Friends House in Gramercy Park.
I see.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I saw a few more hands for questions.
I've got a possibly irrelevant question. What were you thinking about when this was being filmed? Like, were you like thinking about, oh, maybe should I move this way or that way, or were you just like in like a zone, or?
I was just trying to kind of hold up. You can't see, but I was sweating. It was extremely heavy. My neck was hurting a lot. We would film like little snippets at a time, and then some of the people that I had on set would come up behind me and like hold the hair like this for a little while to give me a little bit of a break. But if I'm being honest, so that those are kind of like the human things that I was thinking. This is heavy, this hurts, I'm sweating. But in my brain, the kind of point of doing it this way, and if you guys are able to join me on Saturday, you'll kind of see how I reinvent this here. The idea is that I wanted to kind of show the embodied practice of holding the weight, the physical weight and tension of feeling like a kid kind of born out of place. Like you don't fit in one place, you don't fit another place. Through adornment, you try to find more of that. Through stripping down and being vulnerable, you try to be more honest with it. It was an honoring of all of these kind of complicated feelings that I was having inside. And I think the kind of endurance nature of this performance was a way to honor that tension that I hold every day. And that I think so many of us, no matter who we are, hold every day. And so that's really what I was thinking about. I was thinking about how heavy and how challenging it is. Yeah.
I love what you said about how we're doing this every day. So many people are doing this every day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. Are there any other questions?
A question. Joshua, with your background with activism and raising awareness, and then becoming an artist, and now Hank Willis Thomas is your mentor. You know, it's the For Freedoms, billboards. I wonder, how are you planning on combining those two things, like visual art, maybe memorial, sculpture, public art, and protest?
Well, I mean, gosh, I feel like I'm a little bit busy right now to be working on something new. But what Hank and I speak about a lot, and a lot of the team at For Freedoms too, is how we could make change making and storytelling a part of the everyday conversation, which is what we did with the Billboard project. Um, and so I'm interested in how I could do more work in public space. So I guess you'll see a little bit on Saturday. Saturday's performance is like a meditation. It's kind of offering people the space to come together and kind of hold your feelings. With the Billboard project, I did that. I don't remember if I shared it with you, but I had there was a really big mural of me on the side of the Queen's Museum a couple summers ago. So for right now, what I'm doing is inserting myself. I'm giving myself to the world as a gift. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm giving myself, I'm giving my image because I hope and I imagine what it means for a lot of people is dignity and power. That's what I experienced when I was honored with that piece at the Queen's Museum. You know, it was there for a whole year, and it was kind of a tribute to the queer heroes from the city. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing right now is just thinking about the kind of timestamps. We live in a world in 2020, 2021, 2022, where we're experiencing policy rollbacks and protections for queer people and trans people, attacks on women and reproductive healthcare rights. And so I'm really interested in how art unapologetically being inserted in public space can help change hearts and minds. And that is what we're talking a lot about right now. But yeah, it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to get big billboard campaigns like that going. So we're gonna let that one cook right now, but I'll be back soon.
Beautiful.
Can I ask?
Ask as
Do
many.
you feel like there's, because there is being so much pushback,
Mhm.
how does the queer community, are you feeling differently about the way you have to approach the public end of what you're doing because of the pushback? I mean, have things changed remarkably because of this, or are you all just forward seek searching, or what stage are you?
Well, I'd be curious to know what you think about this too. I can say this part, that in terms of receiving funding or opportunities, people are terrified. A number of organizations that I work with and individuals as well have just gotten their NEA, their National Endowment of Arts grants revoked. And that's a big deal for a lot of people who rely on that funding especially if it's paying your staff or if it's paying a production team to come on and shoot your next project. If you don't have that, you're really kind of dead in the water. And so I know a lot of people are afraid of that. Like I said, I'm in a unique position where I think I know I'm going to be able to create regardless. But that part does scare me a little bit. Or even thinking about like oftentimes many of the institutions that I work with have nonprofit status. Um, and if they lost that status because the federal government revokes queer organizations or Black-led organizations or whatever, then would I be able to continue the residency here? No, right? And so that part scares me. But I mean, what am I going to do? Freak out about it? That is kind of out of my hands. So I just try to continue to create. I'll be honest about like the kind of physical safety things that does bring me pause. Because it is real, you know, you hear about things all the time, or even it's like people threatening. I serve on the Brooklyn Arts Council on our grant making panel, and we had a Zoom meeting recently, and the Zoom was like Zoom bombed. Like so, people like came in and were shouting all kinds of crazy stuff. Yes, that was a couple weeks ago. It was terrifying, you know.
Wow.
And then it made me, and I'm not like the most tech savvy person in the world. I'm like, oh my God, like how does that work? Like, you know, this stuff like that, cyber attacks, like we're in a kind of different age.
Yeah.
And so those things do bring me pause. I try not to let it dictate how I create. But maybe when I'm trying to think about like a 3-year plan of the residencies that I'm going to take on, or the places that I want to be, or even a lot of like the Smithsonian is cutting down a lot of their African American programming right
Yeah.
now. If you think about the places that you want this kind of work to show, maybe part of the anxiety is, are these places going to be here, or are they going to be interested in showing this work for the next 4 years? That is kind of intimidating sometimes. So what do you think?
Hopefully only the next 4 years.
Hopefully 3.5.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. I think that this is definitely a very precarious time in the art world because of these grants being revoked. I also think one thing that's interesting is that we're actually this is a particularly unique time because we definitely did see after the summer of 2020 and during the summer of 2020, when there were widespread protests over the killings of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, there was an incredible push in the art world to finance Black artists. And I have seen in my networks, I have seen on social media a lot of people talking about the way that that funding has almost immediately dried up.
Yeah.
There is definitely, I would say, historical precedence for this time in the sense of I look toward the 1960s and 1970s art world. We had organizations like the Black Emergency Cultural Coalition, who were protesting organizations like the Met and the MoMA. They were picketing because of the lack of inclusion of Black artists in these permanent collections. And now we see in the 2010s, late 2010s, these very same organizations making shows about the history of protest at the museum and including documentation about times that the museum has been protested for their lack of diversity. And so you see these institutions during times of political conservatism, but more of like a social liberalism, trying to prove their own identity as yes, they've learned in a lot of ways they've learned. And then we also see, of course, that there is still a great lack of support for Black and queer artists. And so I think that it's really interesting to think about these things in that context of the incredible work that artists have done in previous generations. And I think that we're seeing that now, this combination of activism and artistic endeavor and the ways that they work really synergistically. And I thank you for that question. I think that that was a great question. Oh, I see another question.
Yes, if there is audio that matches with this video, and if so, can we hear a little bit of it?
No, there is audio that matches with it, but you can't hear it. That's why Montauk's working on it. So it's just not done yet. It's just not done yet. But just kind of expanding on that, the me expressing kind of some of the feelings that I was thinking during this practice. I'll kind of highlight some of those, maybe connect them into the broader kind of global context that I find myself living in. So connecting the personal to the political. And I'll finish the writing and I'll let it go. And then when it's done, I'll let you have it for sure.
Yeah, because film with audio brings it even closer. Then all the senses are involved.
Yeah. It's coming. I'm glad it's speaking to you, and I'm glad you feel there's something more to be said. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to view it today.